Hi.
Hey there, Margaret. How's it going?
Hi. All right, all right. Thank you for asking me to do this. This
Yeah,
sounds quite in
I was really looking forward to meeting you. And yeah, chemistry, I guess I was never good at it. So I thought, let's take some advice from Margaret. That's You are a chemistry teacher. So yeah, a warm welcome to my channel, Margaret. It's good to have you here.
Thank you.
And how was your day? How were the classes?
I think I've had quite a muddly day today. One student didn't turn up. It was a new student, even though I sent them a reminder. So they haven't got back to me. So I don't know what happened there. And another student who I was supposed to have at 2:30, he didn't show up. So when I messaged, and then I looked at it and thought, oh, I don't have him today. I have him. It was next week his lesson is. So I've had a bit of a very busy couple of weeks, and I've
Yeah.
been so bombarded with a lot of stuff that I think I'm making a few mistakes here and there. Hopefully, it'll slow down soon.
Yeah, sure. But it's great that you took out some time for this podcast. So it really means a lot to me. Thank you for doing that.
That's
And
all right.
and I want to know, Margaret, what first sparked your interest in chemistry, and how did you decide to make it your career?
I think the probably my very first chemistry lesson at the age of 13. I think when I was very small, so I'm connecting this to a time when I was maybe about 5 or 6, and I was making a mud pie in the garden, as you do when you're little. And I picked up this big lump of dirt. I remember this day really clearly, even though I was small. And I was kind of breaking it down to put it in my mud pie. So then I started to break it down and I was like, well, how small does this go? So I was holding just a little grain of dirt and going, does that get any smaller?
Oh,
And the smaller bits of that, do they get any smaller? So that was the first time I can remember just that sense of how small does this actually go? And my first all grade chemistry lesson, we learned about atoms. And I was just like, wow, oh my God, this is amazing. And for every point the teacher made or every question, I put my hand up and said, what about this? And every time she answered a question, I had another 10 questions queuing up. And that was it. I think that very first lesson, moving away from general science to actual chemistry was the moment I started to fall in love with it. Um, in terms of making it my career, it was a no-brainer and I didn't even think about it. When I
yeah.
came to apply for university, it was a case of what course are you going to do? Well, I'm going to do chemistry because it's my favorite subject. Yeah, there was what else am I going to do?
Wow.
Um, because it was my best subject and it was the
Mhm.
one I was interested in. That
Interesting.
and I just went to university to do chemistry. I didn't know. I think when I was little, I said I'd be a teacher, but by the time I got to do my degree, I said I would never be a teacher.
Oh,
Quote, I will never be a teacher. I wouldn't touch it with a 10-foot barge pole. But chemistry, I was well into that. Yeah, so that's how I got there. Just pure, I love this. I love this stuff.
and
Is why.
yeah, it's astonishing. Since childhood, you had this kind of you were head over heels with this subject, and you stick to it. You were fixated with it, and you eventually made it your career. So wow,
Yeah,
yeah,
but unintentionally so, but yeah, it was. Well, I'm not going to stop doing it because I love it basically.
And in the light of what you're saying, Margaret, like you have taught many students over the years. So what do you enjoy the most about being a chemistry tutor?
I think if I talk about being a tutor rather than a classroom teacher, because I was a classroom teacher for about 28 and a half years until I left to become a tutor. And the thing I love the most about what I'm doing now, other than I'm still doing chemistry, is being able to give students time. So mostly I tutor one to one, I did try groups, and I'll do groups if people ask me, but I tend not to try and build groups. So I mostly do work one to one. And the thing I value most about that is giving that one to one and that space to the student. Because in a classroom situation, you can't really do that. And I didn't realize until I started tutoring full time how frustrating that was as a classroom teacher. I wasn't aware of it, but I was aware of plenty of students and that feeling of I'm not doing enough to help that particular student. Because if I could only sit down with them for 20 minutes, they would get this. But if you've got an hour's lesson and you've got 24, 25, up to 30 students in the class, you cannot give one student 20 minutes. Um, so once I started tutoring full time, and I realised actually this is really important, this conversation with this student now. And it did make me realise how frustrating that aspect of being a classroom teacher was. I don't think I was fully aware of it until I could actually give students the time. So that's what I enjoy most about being a tutor at the moment.
Hmm.
Definitely.
Fascinating. Wow. And was there a particular teacher, mentor, or moment that shaped your path in science education?
I think there were probably two. Um, if I think about, I mean, the two people that kind of got me into chemistry, one was my very first all grade chemistry teacher. And I think she was a brilliant teacher, but she wasn't one of those all singing, dancing, entertaining teachers.
Okay.
She was a very thorough, very straight person, and I loved her lessons. I loved her lessons. Um, and I think it was when I became a teacher, it was as I look back on the things that she did and realised that I'd adopted some of them in my own teaching and actually realised how skilled she was. But I mean, she used to do things like she would maybe start the lesson with maybe about 5 to 10 questions that she would ask around the class based on what we did last lesson. So it was a recap, but I don't ever remember that being a stressful situation or any of my peers being stressed at it. And as a teacher now, what I'm thinking is she must have structured those questions very carefully and very deliberately and picked what student she was going to ask which question. And I think she was very skilled at doing that because I don't ever remember anyone feeling stressed about that. Um, I think she also held me to a very high standard. So, I mean, chemistry was my best subject, and I was good at it. And usually, maybe we would have these like ink exercise, they called it. So this was our smart homework that we handed in, basically. And very often, I never ever dropped more than 2 marks in them. Except one one day I did. I think I'd been in a rush and whatever it was I was doing, I'd rushed the homework and handed it in, and I got 16 out of 25. And it wasn't really anything that she said. It was when she handed me my book back, she went, Margaret Mary Kane, and she dropped it on the desk in disgust. And my friends looked at me like, oh, what have you done? And I was like, I don't know. And I looked at it and I got 16 out of 25 and I was mortified.
Oh,
And that was all she did. And I never ever disappointed her again from that level. So I think she was brilliant because she managed to not stress people out, but at the same time, she made you know if this isn't good enough. Do you know what I
mm.
mean?
Yeah, the
Um,
type of aura, like the glance of the eyes or that look itself, that's enough. There are no words required.
Well, or just her tone. I mean, just she never said anything different when she was handing out the books. It was all in the tone. It was all in the tone. I'm so disappointed in you. You know, it was just like, oh, okay. I don't want her to be disappointed in me. Um, so yeah, I think as I look back on it, and that had an impact on me. I can also say, maybe in a less positive way, and I don't mean it negatively because it was the maths teacher I had when I was doing higher maths, and maths was my next subject, and I was really good at maths. And obviously, he had high expectations as well, but he was a little bit scary. And I think the combination of him being scary and having high expectations made me feel afraid to tell him if I was stuck, which is completely ridiculous because when I did ask him for help, he's lovely about it. But I had this as a, I don't know, 14, 15 year old. I was a little bit frightened of him and I didn't want to tell him I couldn't do something. And I think going forward as a teacher, I've remembered that. So I've tried to be careful about, that quiet student sitting in the corner, not to assume that they're being lazy or they can't, so I've gone, okay, they're quiet. I'm going to have a quiet look at what they're doing and just try not to be scary. Although there are other places where I clearly was scary. But no, I really, because that had impacted me, I tried not to be like that, to be more open with other students. That shy student who might have been just like me and be a bit nervous and not wanting to say,
And
yeah.
it feels like you must have been a studious person back in your, like when you were a student.
Yeah, I was a SWAT. I think where I come from, SWAT was used as an insult, and I would get even from people who didn't know me. They go, "Oh, you're that brainy girl." So it would be like either a SWAT, and that was used to as an insult, or "Oh, you're that brainy girl. I've heard about you." So it was used as an insult. But I loved school. I loved learning. I was really curious. And I didn't really care what people thought about that, actually. I enjoyed what I was doing, and if I had questions, I asked them. I was quite curious.
Wow.
Yeah.
And the next question, speaking of questions, Margaret, I can resonate with this question. Like many students find chemistry challenging. So, what strategies do you use to make it more engaging and understandable?
I think my biggest thing, and again, it's a point of curiosity for me in the relationship with the student, but also in terms of teaching slash tutoring, is that I try to get inside the student's head, and I mean that in the nicest possible way. It is to try and figure out what is the barrier for this particular student to get this. Um, because if I can identify that with the student, so it's not something I'm doing to the student, but with the student, and really get to analyze what the particular barrier is, then we have a better chance to or sort the problem out and find a way around it so that they can overcome it. Um, and once they've done that, once they've kind of got over that understanding barrier and we've identified the key issue that's getting in the way, the students they start to relax more. Um, and once they've started to relax and the stress that's taken out of the situation, they will actually engage much more from that point. And I
Mm.
think that's my biggest thing is what is it that's getting in the way? And sometimes you just can't find it. I mean, there was a GCSE student I had last year, and she could not get her head around changes of state terms. So like melting, boiling, evaporation, condensation. She couldn't
Yeah.
get those the right way around. And she was understanding other difficult parts, more difficult things in the course. But every time we came to a question, like what is the name for the change that happens when a solid changes to gas or a solid changes to liquid? She was like, oh, what is it? What is it? And for some reason, and we went over it about 4 or 5 times. In the end, I said to her, you need to stop worrying about this. Just leave it. Sometimes you can't. I don't know what the barrier was. We never got to the bottom of it, and we just said, don't worry about it. It's a couple of marks. Don't worry about it. You're picking up the marks somewhere else.
Intriguing.
Um,
Now it reminds me of my school days, Margaret, while having this conversation with you, like the water boils at 100-degree Celsius and evaporation, then condensation, this sort of terminologies, I guess, that comes
yeah.
under chemistry, right? Those things.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, the difference between boiling and evaporation is an interesting one. And again, I might say to people, look, if it's been raining and then the sun comes out, if there's a puddle on the ground,
Mhm.
that puddle will dry up. But if you go and stick your finger in it, you won't get scalded by it. So they go, oh, okay, so it's evaporating, but it's not boiling.
Okay.
Um, so things like that. But yeah, it's about trying to find out what's getting in your way. Let's find a way around it. And sometimes those barriers are quite predictable. I've been teaching long enough, so I kind of have an idea of what the difficulty might be and how we get over it. But sometimes you don't. It's random. It's random, and
Yeah.
it's like, you just have to go, don't worry about it. Actually, at the end of the day, sometimes that's what you've got to say. Not
Mhm.
often, sometimes, yeah.
Got it. And in the light of what you are saying, Margaret, like, how do you balance teaching fundamental concepts with showing students the real world applications of chemistry?
Um, I think there's a combination of things that I do. So if I look at how I tutor, so if we're doing a particular topic, um, I'll have a presentation that I might be talking through with them. And I will give them that presentation as a PDF. So as it is, as I'm sharing with it, as I'm talking with them. So I say it's a presentation, but it's not a you be quiet and listen presentation. It's a conversation, really. So they can ask questions. I check in with them. So they might ask other questions about it. And I will annotate. So this is the getting the fundamentals. Um, I when I'm doing a presentation, I usually record it and I put the recording of the presentation into the classroom. I work on Google Classroom with them so that they can use that again, that talking presentation, that conversation for revision to go back over it if they want to. They might never look at it again, but it's there if they want it. And I also will send them a PDF of the annotated notes. So they have both. They have the unwritten on and the annotated notes. So that's one aspect of it. I also provide them with cheat sheets. So things like organic chemistry, there's a lot of like reagents and conditions that they need to learn. And I have them on cheat sheets. So they may be learning it in the course of the topic, but it's kind of summarized and put on a sheet. One of my students who just did her A level this year, she wrote a review for me, and one of the comments she said on it was that she'd found those cheat sheets really, really helpful. So that's quite nice to know. In terms of real world applications, I tend to feed them in the conversation. So they may not be on the summary notes. So the summary notes that I'm providing them are kind of more geared towards this is the content, usually with an emphasis on how it's applied to the exam. So I'm thinking about exam questions and the kind of concepts that they need. So they have structured notes with a conversation around those notes, but the real world applications tend to come into the conversation. So they might not be written down, but we start talking about them. They ask questions about them. I might tell them anecdotes or stories. Sometimes those are funny, sometimes they're not. Um, but that is again one thing that some of the students, when they come back later with the review, say that they enjoyed that aspect of it as well, that it really inspired them or enthused them about chemistry. Um, So don't make the real world applications formal. It's part of our conversation.
Okay. And apart from chemistry, like Margaret, what kind of things do you like to do in your downtime?
I found this I found this question hard. If I'm not doing chemistry, because I used to like cycle touring, so I would like go on my bike and go away for a week or so, and you stop it. When I was younger, it was camping. When the ones I did recently, I just booked into bed and breakfast places. So I maybe cycle. Um, anything between 30 and 45 miles on
Okay.
a day to get from one place to another, go and visit things. But I had to stop doing that because I got a chronic illness. I got ME, so ME, chronic fatigue syndrome, proper name, myalgic encephalomyelitis. There you go. It's a bit of a mouthful, but one of the things about that, if I push too much physically, I end up with this what they call post-exertional malaise. So I will end up being extremely fatigued. Sometimes it could be for months. So I have to be careful and manage my activity. I'm kind of mild slash moderate. So moderate when it's bad, mild when it's not bad. So I can't do that kind of stuff anymore. So I've had to slow down a little bit. So things that I do that are much more sedate. I read. I like reading. Always have loved reading actually. Um, jigsaws I like. It sounds really nerdy, but they chill me out a lot. I tend to just put music on and maybe just spend an hour doing a jigsaw. Again, it's not something I rush. It sits there on the table until it's done. I'm painting. I like painting. So I paint mandalas. Um, Again, that might be something that I'll do for a few weeks and then move on to something else. But those are the kind of things that are a bit quieter. Um, Occasionally, I still do go out for a cycle ride if I can, if my energy's been good. But I wouldn't go out for somewhere between 10 and 20 minutes. I wouldn't do any more than that, but at the risk of making myself really poorly. But that brings me a lot of joy to do that. So I do it when I can, if I can.
Wow. And when it comes to reading books, what sort of genre do you like?
Oh, um, Oh, that's interesting. It depends whether it's fiction or non-fiction. For fiction books, I tend to read trashy. I'm embarrassed to say this now, but they're quite trashy fantasy books. So
Okay.
there's this whole genre that I've discovered recently. It's called romantasy. I only found out it was called romantasy recently, but it would be things like basically, if it's got magic and swords and dragons in it,
Mhm.
that's usually enough for me to pick it up and read it. So I'm kind of reading things like that. Um, there's a whole genre of them that's a bit risque, actually. That's why I'm blushing. But so like the whole A Court of Thorn and Roses is there's a whole lot of that ilk, but that's I just skipped those pages. So I was go, can't read that. But those are the kind of things and I would say they're quite trashy, but they're quite easy to read, and they just yeah, easy reading. But in non-fiction, I'm quite into spirituality.
Okay.
Uh, so I might read a lot of my read non-fiction reading list is really huge. Um, so I'm reading spirituality books. There's a mystic in Norwich, a medieval woman. She was the first woman in England to write in English. Julian of Norwich, her name is, and I'm associated with the group that looks after that shrine. So through learning about her, I've got a lot of books about her writings, but I've also then got more interested in other medieval religious women, for want of a better word, um, including the Beguines, which were a movement that was around in Europe. So I've kind of found myself drifting into medieval history a little bit
Wow.
through that. So some of my non-fiction books are around spirituality and particularly around the spirituality of medieval women. That's something that's kind of emerged in the last couple of years. It's been a real interest in finding out more about. Yeah, so that's my non-fiction
Wow.
big book pile.
Fascinating. And Margaret, if your entire life was a book, what would be its name?
Oh my goodness.
And also the current chapter of your book, current phase of your life.
Um, the current chapter I think would be called Slow Down. Um, I think that's been certainly since I got ME, there's been the emphasis is to be actually slow down and do less, which is kind of a struggle, actually.
Mhm.
It's kind of a struggle. Um, but I think that that's been a very necessary thing. If it was, if my, oh yeah, I've just got it. If it was a book about my life and the title of it, I would call it, I had it a minute ago, Paradoxically Mixed. There you go.
Wow. Or like,
So just, sorry.
no, I was thinking more like, my chemistry with chemistry.
No, I think it's well, maybe, but I think because there's so much eclectic stuff that's quite important to me.
Hmm.
Um, and I think some of it appears quite paradoxical. Um, you know, because I have this whole spirituality thing going on,
Yeah.
and there's a thing in the culture here that I think it comes from Victorian men. The whole, oh, you can't but believe in God and be spiritual and all of that and be a scientist.
Hmm.
So I know that when when students have found out that I have all of this spirituality thing going on, you can see them being really confused and they go, yes, but you're a scientist. Like that was a contradiction. It's a real thing. Um, and I do remember one Muslim student who was really struggling with what was going on and came to talk to me and he was just like, you believe in God and you're a scientist. And so it was a thing he was wrestling with and we had a conversation about that. So I think that that's something that can seem quite paradoxical. I don't think there's any conflict there at all and don't have an issue with it, but it is perceived as being a conflict.
Hmm.
Um, I think so. So yeah, I would say that some of it seems paradoxical to people, and I have such a mixture of things going on that sometimes it surprises people. They go, "You do that?"
Wow. Yeah. And how much time do you spend towards reading book, because you are always bombarded with classes, students and all. So how much time do you usually get to blow up some steam?
I think again, and if I talk about slowing down, so I was diagnosed with ME. I don't want this to be all about ME, but it is such a significant thing, and in the context of my work, when I was already, interestingly, I'd already resigned to leave school teaching to become a tutor before this. Um, but it happened. I became ill as I was making that transition, which is really fortuitous that I did because now I work from home. I'm in charge of my own timetable. it makes it very, very easy for me now to manage my time. So for example, I know you asked me about reading, and I'm coming to that. Um, for the first 2 hours when I get up in the morning, I'm a bit like a zombie. I'm quite clumsy. I'm not coordinated, and I feel just like, oh. So it might take me 2 hours to become functional. So I have 2 hours in the morning, and usually that's when I read fiction because my brain isn't working that well either, which is why I read trashy stuff that's not difficult. So I might spend half an hour to 45 minutes having breakfast, reading while I'm having breakfast, just chilling out until I feel that I've got to a point where okay, actually I'm feeling a bit more ready to engage. So I read every day fantasy fiction, nothing too difficult. I don't always read non-fiction, because again, it's one thing that with this condition, it's made more difficult reading more difficult to do. But I'm trying to set myself a target of five pages of non-fiction. Some days I'd manage it, and sometimes I don't. And I think what what I do is I have a book stand that I set on on my table, and when I'm sitting there, I might try and read 5 pages. Um, Again, that's a bit more hit or miss. That depends how tired or fatigued I am. But it's something that I'm trying to do. I've been quite successful in the last 2 weeks of doing that, maybe doing that twice a day. So it's all about balance, really. But I think it's because I'm now in charge of my own timetable. And I spread my lessons out and I leave half an hour between one student and another so that I do have time to go and rest
Yeah.
in between students. So I have a rest before I tutor and then a rest after I tutor. So in between students. So I think being in charge of my own timetable, being in charge of my own work, um, allows me to manage it. And I do it by spreading it through the whole day. It's not, I don't just work during the day and then evening off. I scatter it,
Yeah.
which works. It works for me.
Got it. And Margaret, before we call it a day, like what sort of life lessons or life advice would you like to give to me and to my viewers,
Um, Life lessons.
or advice like that you have like as your vast experience of life and so like any sagacious advice that you would like to give?
I think acceptance is a big thing.
Okay.
Um, there are some things and this is true with students as well. There are some things that we have no control over. We have no control over. I have no control over this illness or what's happened. We have in terms of relation to students, they talk about, oh, do you think the 2026 exam will be harder than? And I said, you have no control over that. And it's not worth spending your energy on that. Um, so I think the when we try to fight things that we have, there's nothing we can do about it.
Yeah.
You can go again. Some students they go into school and they've got a particular teacher that they don't go on with, and I'm like, well, you have no control over that.
Definitely.
Actually, so acceptance is a big thing, and to look at where are you spending your energy? Because that's important question for me now, but it's where are you spending your energy? And if you're spending it sort of stressing and fighting about something that you can't change it, you can't control it, it's a waste of energy. It's a waste. So it's about accepting those things and going, well, what can I change within this? So again, with my chemistry students, they might be stressing about it, but it's just, you can't change that. All you can do is what we have in front of us now, and you're struggling with this topic and this particular part of this topic. So that's what we're going to try to change. We're going to try to fix that. And not just for this question that's in front of us, but so that you can answer every question that's like this in the future, because that's a small thing that you've changed. And I have this my educational philosophy, for want of a better word, is which I do talk to students about, is that if you take an empty bucket and set it under a dripping tap, that bucket will soon fill up with water as the tap
Wow.
drips into it. And so what I'm saying to them is you can't stress about, will I have a full bucket next August? All you can do is be here now, and you put your bucket under the tap and you try to catch these drips that are falling down. And because if we do that over a period of time and we keep doing it, putting drips in your bucket, you won't have to worry about your bucket being full. That in the future, you just have to deal with now. And I think that's my education philosophy.
Wow.
Is it's a dripping tap. Put your bucket under the dripping tap and
Yeah.
don't worry about the things you can't control.
Awesome. That was amazing. And I guess Rome wasn't built in a day. So
Well,
that,
exactly.
yeah. And acceptance, wow, that thing is also like mind-boggling, I guess. You cannot control the waves, but you can always learn how to surf. So I guess,
Exactly.
yeah. And on that
Yeah.
note, Margaret, thank you for your precious time over here. It means a
You're
lot.
welcome.
And yeah, we're gonna catch up soon in the future as well. I will bother you again sometime. So
Don't hesitate. It's been my pleasure.
yeah, definitely. So take care, Margaret. I had such a whale of time having this conversation with you. And yeah.
Okay. Okay. Bye. Take care.